Hello everyone, welcome to LexTalk World Talk Show presented by Clickaway Creators. Today we have Shalinee Fernandez with us. Shalinee graduated with a law degree from the University of London in 1999 and the University of England, Australia in 2020 and admitted as an advocate and solicitor to the High Court of Malaysia in October 2002. With close to 19 years of experience, 5 years in private practice as a partner, undertaking both litigation and corporate work in the areas of general civil litigation, employment, family law, banking, industrial relations, and corporate winding up proceedings. She is now the Senior Legal Counsel Asia-Pacific for Ansell, an Australian multinational corporation which manufactures protective industrials and medical gloves, including PPE worldwide, and is a part of the Ansell Global Legal Team supporting Ansell's global operations and sourcing too. Shalinee is also in the midst of completing her papers to get called as a solicitor to the Supreme Court of New South Wales, Australia. Now, I have a lot to talk about when it comes to Shalinee Fernandez, but let me just introduce you to her directly. Hello, Shalinee, how are you?
Hi, Bharti. I'm good, thank you. Thanks.
Glad to know that, Shalinee, and it's a pleasure that we have you here.
Yes, thank
So,
you.
without any further ado, please brief us about your journey as a legal professional so far.
Well, it was probably something which was never really planned. Although I think, as from the age of I think 5, I've always wanted to be a lawyer. I didn't really know what it entailed, but I kind of knew that I was going to walk down that path. So practice was always my passion. So I naturally looked towards becoming a litigation lawyer. I completed my degree and I did my chambering, and then I chambered with quite one of the larger firms in Malaysia, hoping to garner enough exposure from both litigation and corporate. It was ironic because at that point, my passion was always litigation. It was never corporate, but it's funny where you end up sometimes in life. But having said that, it was a very exciting 5 years, 5 years of which I practiced in several parts of Malaysia, and I got to work with many senior lawyers who really taught me to learn the ropes, a lot of senior counsels with different exposures in different areas of the law. And at the age of 29, I remember I decided to open up my own firm. So everyone thought it was, probably a little too early, but, I always felt that, you have to keep moving. So I had a partner. We opened up a very small setup. Thereafter, you really learn to do everything, when you have your own firm from scratch. And after that, I was offered a junior partner role in a larger mid-sized firm. And at that point, I clocked in about 5 years in practice. And I was thinking to myself, what next? And I distinctly remember something a friend of mine said, and I'll always remember it till today. He said, do you want to be a big fish in a small pond? And that got me thinking. And I was thinking, yeah, here I am going to court, coming back, but isn't there more to life than just this? And somewhere at the corner of my mind, I'd seen all these programs and movies about corporate lawyers flying the world, and negotiating contracts, closing deals. And I was thinking, you know what? I think that's what I want to do. And it's easier said than done because there's a lot of effort. There's a lot of effort that comes into it. I didn't land a role with a multinational immediately. I worked with, I made the transition into the Malaysian Stock Exchange. And thereafter, I moved on to several listed companies in Malaysia, and picking up the trades as I went along. And finally, then the road or the path opened for the multinationals, which was, I think, a good 10 years ago when I joined my first multinational. And that's when I realized that, okay, this is it. This is where I want to be, and I found my place, and that's pretty much how this entire 19 years passed. It's amazing how time flies, So and yes, I'm very excited because I went back to school again while working to complete my papers to get called as a lawyer in New South Wales, Australia. So that's also been very exciting. 20 years later, going back again, studying while working, it's a different experience. But I think it's certainly been very enriching. So, that's where I'm pretty much at this point, Bharti.
Well, that was quite a journey, Shalini. I mean, success, failure, struggles, everything together, and that's what 19 years have, led you to. So everything is well till the time, you have made the most out of the learnings that you have got, you have had. So, well, we have talked about your journey as a legal professional. Now it will be very unfair of me to ask this question, but anyways, I'm gonna ask. Uh, with 19 years of experience, so this is the reason that I'm saying that it would be unfair. Please tell us about your most memorable case or transaction, because I'm sure there are many, and I'm sure there are key takeaways from every case that or every transaction that you take up. But the most memorable one.
Yeah, like you mentioned, Bharti, there's been many, many different cases, but I think the first thing or the first project that really comes at the top of my head is when I decided to leave my home country, Malaysia, and venture out into another country, which I felt had a bigger market. In this case, it was India. And at that point, I was an ICT lawyer. So the market in Malaysia, while it's very diversified, it's rather smaller. So and that's when I went for probably a myriad of interviews over a span of 1 year, and I finally landed this role with this, which is a company very synonymous in India called Ola, and they were looking to launch in international markets. And having taken Ola's many times, by myself when I was in India, it was certainly a company that I reckoned with. I could understand. And what really prepared me thereafter, I think that was a journey that was unlike no other, because, and I think I was very privileged as a lawyer to have even taken on such a role, because, the role itself was very tricky, in the sense that, an Indian company, laws very diversified from the international markets it wants to step into. It entailed setting up entirely new legal processes, having to diversify the app from what it was in Indian laws to other countries. And Australia and New Zealand happened to be the first two countries they, were looking to venture into, and thereafter the UK. My experience working in Australia and New Zealand prior to that was probably the factor that allowed me to even get this role, and I embraced it, because I received my tickets and I was told, okay, you've got 1 week to fly to Melbourne and you have to hit the ground running, because we don't have time, you have to launch. And I didn't know anyone. I just reached there, and I was welcomed by this amazing legal team, and all different departments of people who are, I would say without a doubt, my good friends till today. So, it's amazing that, and I think the level of detail that we had to put into it was just immense. Working with transport regulators in all these countries, working to bridge the gap from every aspect, to make sure that, you're a new company, you want to be compliant, and another thing about Australia is the fact that it goes by state laws. So it's not as simple as saying, hey, we're launching in Australia, there's one universal unified law. There are so many states, and every state has distinct transport regulations. So we had to go state by state to get accredited. And that's no joke, because they need to look at your safety requirements. They need to, so it was, but at the end of it, and we managed to sort of launch on the entire Australian continent. And thereafter, I flew to New Zealand and, repeated the process there with, so I think it was, conference calls up to 12 a.m. and getting up at 6 a.m. the next day, working for 1 year without, any rest. But certainly, if you were to ask me if I were to do it all over again, I will say yes, because that is probably one of the projects that I'll always look back very fondly on, and it has maybe even changed me as a lawyer, and has helped me a lot to learn. So yes, Ola, international markets, which was about 2 years ago.
Wow, I just got lost when you were telling me everything. I mean, wow, quite moving, I can say. And the way you were explaining it actually, tells us that it is indeed your most memorable case. So let's dive deeper into your, specialization, Shalini. Let's talk about how do you look at cross-border contract drafting and negotiations in 2021? But with 2020 just passed by, and we have seen a lot of changes and a lot of things, but at the same time, we cannot just foresee after what has happened with us. Uh, but we would really like to know what's your take on this and how do you think it can change in a coming few years? I'm not going to name the number 5 years, 10 years down the line, but just your views on this.
I think it's safe to say what has transpired in the last 1 year has changed things so drastically. And I think the ripple effects of what has actually happened is going to be with us for the next probably decade or even a couple of decades. It has not only changed how the legal industry works, I mean, it's cut across every different industry. So, looking at cross-border transactions, an area which was pretty much settled, just like many other areas in life, pre-COVID, has now become totally different. I feel moving forward, what's going to happen is people have now begun to sort of appreciate and recognize the fact that there's so many issues that have come up, that has made things so difficult to work around, that parties are now becoming more mutually agreeable to maybe using a particular neutral governing law. Let's see if you've got two different differing laws, Korean laws, Malaysian laws, and parties are so much more agreeable these days to say, let's agree on English laws, and I think that has cut into every single clause into cross-border contracts, not just that aspect. People are more palatable. You know why? Simply because, there's so many things to deal with already. And the last thing they want to do is make things difficult for both parties, So I think if there's any good point or a plus point of COVID vis-a-vis cross-border contracts and transactions, this is a good thing that has come out of it, So it wasn't all entirely bad. Force majeure clauses, which were very different from one jurisdiction to the other, are also, I think what's happening is people are trying to bridge the gap to try and globalize things, make things more easier, so that moving forward, there would be one universal law as opposed to multiple, conflicting laws. And that's how I see contracts, especially concerning cross borders, moving forward in the next 5, even 10 years from now.
Thank you, Shalini, for answering that question and sharing your experience and knowledge with us. So let's talk more about the organization that you're working with. How has your current role as heading legal operations for Asia Pacific in the PP industry has transitioned from what it was pre-pandemic to post-pandemic? Sorry, there's no post-pandemic. We are still in the middle of the pandemic. So can you please throw light on that too?
Yeah, I think the universe has a funny way of putting me in certain industries that seem to always, suddenly get very activated. And I think Ansell is one such company, because I had the privilege of joining Ansell as a consultant in September 2019. And thereafter, it went on to become a permanent role. So it was certainly that couple of months before we made that turn into COVID, and I'll honestly, handling operations is no walk in the park, simply because it's so fluid. It's akin to being like a doctor on call, because at any given time, anything could happen in any plant, and I cover the whole of Asia Pacific. So you're constantly having to deal with something that you cannot possibly even plan, But even so, with all the measures in place, I think the company had a certain level of business as usual going on until COVID hit. And being in the PPE industry, which is unlike many other industries that took a hit, for us, we were on the opposite side of things, sales skyrocketed, but this only meant that, working under such constraints, during COVID, ensuring that, we increase sales, because there were a lot of frontliners looking to, there was shortage of a lot of single-use gloves in the world, so many other PPE gears and all that we really had to churn out to meet the demands of the global market, And I think what had happened was, in tandem with doing that, the safety of our employees was also going hand in hand with that. And it was not easy. For example, in countries like Sri Lanka, we run our largest operations there. How are we going to ensure that our employees were safe at all times? How are we going to transport them? So, we had to sit down and put in all these measures. How are we going to do social distancing on the buses? When we're talking about thousands and hundreds of buses, ferrying, people going back and forth, which was, initially free flow, and now because of COVID, things had just changed. How do we zone them? So we had to look for hostels to keep them at a safe place, so that, and if there was a area that was infected, how are we going to, curtail it? It has been the longest marathon of our life. We keep telling ourselves it's going to end, but it hasn't. And but on one hand, we're happy that we've been able to donate, contribute, sponsor, and really work our way through the pandemic. Make ourselves really contribute towards something that has happened to mankind. And I'm really, really proud to say that I'm part of this amazing organization that has really been able to help everyone, from a frontliner to the normal man walking down the street. And it's not ended, because but today where we are at is, we've learned to adapt, become more agile, and continuing to churn out a certain amount while still ensuring that our employees are best protected, with safety being the foremost priority for us in all the countries we operate. In fact, I can even go to the extent of saying that the standards we put in are even higher than what is even required by the government of the day in each of these countries. So, I'm really happy to see an organization that really walks the talk. And so in a nutshell, pre-pandemic and current pandemic, huge difference. And what is going to happen in the next few months is going to be exciting, but I suppose let's just all ride the wave and see where we land, hope for the best.
Absolutely. Absolutely, Shalinee. Thank you so much yet again for sharing your knowledge with us on this topic. Now, we've talked about your journey, we've talked about your specialization, your contribution in your organization as well. Let's talk about your experience with the legal profession, as in, like, you have had a journey, you have spent like 19 years in this legal space, which is almost 2 decades. It's a huge amount of time. What does it take? So, with your experience, I just want to know. I just want to get the gist of it. That what does it take for a legal professional to remain competitive and progressive, and what is required to constantly evolve and adapt with the changing times? Because, as we say, change is the only constant. But with your experience, what should be the things to be taken care of?
I think the core trait of any legal professional, regardless of whether they spent 19 years, in the industry, or even if they're a fresh lawyer, I'd like to say that I think the most important thing here would be their ability to adapt, to be fluid, to be versatile. You could be stepping from one industry to the other. If you're a lawyer, you should be able to sort of take on any sort of role or any sort of industry that comes your way. Because if you work on your basic premise as a lawyer, your basic legal principles, you should be able to take those legal principles and apply them across any different area. It could be the largest M&A transaction. It could be a very simple sale and purchase agreement or a tenancy agreement, or a simple contract clarification. But what you always need to remember is, to never find yourself in a situation where you become very rigid, you become very complacent, and you refuse to grow. And um and i i remember this very quick story of a very, very successful lawyer, and he shared something with me. It was the weekend and everybody was going shopping, and I know, so I asked him, I said, what are your plans? And he said, oh, I'm writing my book on cybersecurity. And that's when I thought to myself, oh my God, what am I doing? you know, am I making a change? Am I really changing? Am I testing the waters, or am I very complacent being in this realm that I'm in? And that is when, and I think that was a few years ago, and that is when I never stopped. I told myself, you need to keep on taking on more things. Okay, you've succeeded, move to the next level, and you will never know unless you take these things on. And what I do see is many people, if they find themselves in a very comfy position, they're there, they tend to be there. And I don't mean being in the same company for years, because there are various roles that you can take on in one company if it's large enough. It's a matter of wanting to learn, wanting to challenge yourself. It's painful. It's very painful. And sometimes you ask yourself, why am I even doing this to myself? Am I a glutton for punishment? But at the end of the day, when you complete those tasks, you feel a sense of fulfillment, that you're happy that you're able to have moved that far. And another thing I wanted to say is, I've worked like from the smallest of setups, being running a firm on my own with my partner, just the two of us, uh, and versus working in the largest of multinationals. You always have to remember that, you're the same person, you carry the same values, regardless of which company you walk into. I think ethics are also very important when it comes to being a lawyer. Obviously, it is, as is with any other profession, but more so being a legal professional. Your integrity is important. How people view you is important, and the decisions that you make say a lot. You can be very technically savvy as a lawyer, but that's not all. There needs to be so many other important core skills, like how would you ethically handle a situation. Is there a certain degree of compassion into how you take your decisions as a lawyer, whether you're a corporate lawyer, or so I think there are a lot of things at play, but the most important thing are these core things that I've mentioned. And I think if there's anything I've learned in these 19 years, it's to take it as it comes, and try to be the best that you can be, because you will never have two similar situations. But what you are is yourself and your values, and you have to see it through, based on those values.
Thank you very much, Shalinee, for sharing such great insights with us. I'm sure it will be a great help for people, for our budding lawyers as well, and also for people who are already, in the industry for quite some time. They'll get to learn from your experience and knowledge a lot. We really look forward to having a chat with you again in the future on some other trending topics in the international legal industry. And for our viewers, if you like this chat with Shalinee, please like and share this video, and also subscribe to ClickAway Creators YouTube channel to appreciate what we do, and you have more coming from industry legal leaders. This is Bharti for LexTalk signing off.